This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and I'm excited to share this new season of the podcast with you. With both fall and winter arriving in the Pacific Northwest, it's time to store the mobile recording studio. This season, we'll be switching things up and interviewing some of my favorite hikers that I follow on Instagram virtually. We're following a similar format to season 1, where the first part of the episode focuses on the guest and their hiking adventures, and we're still going to end each episode with a speed round of this or that questions, all related to hiking. We have an amazing guest on today's episode. Her name is Bink, and you can follow her on Instagram at Adventures of Bink. I had a fun time chatting with Bink on this episode. We learn about her backpacking trips across the Southwest and West Coast, her van life experience, and her love for bears. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Bink. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I have a really great guest today with me, Bink from the Southwest. I'm really excited to learn about her backpacking experiences, hiking experiences, as well as her van life experiences. Thank you, Bink, for joining us today on the podcast. We always like to start off with a little introduction from the guest to kind of let our listener know a little bit about you and how you kind of started hiking and backpacking.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ivan. And I look forward to chatting with you and going over some of my history and all my hiking experience. I was born and raised in Arizona, and I was always kind of an outdoorsy person. I played a lot of sports growing up. I did a lot of running. And in high school, I ran cross country. So that kind of got me more into trails and getting more outdoors. And my cross country team would train in Flagstaff over the summers. So that kind of got me really familiar with that area. When I moved to Flagstaff to go to NAU, I got more and more into trail running over the years and kind of transitioned into hiking here and there. But then around 2012, I got really into more hiking than running. It's been a fun time, just a lot of outdoor living, and Flagstaff has so many trails that you can't ignore them.
And growing up in Arizona, was there a favorite region that you like to visit as a kid? And is there a new region that you like to visit more often than others?
Growing up in Arizona, especially the Phoenix area, I was used to cactus and deserts and yellows and brown colors. So going to Flagstaff and Sedona with green trees and blue water here and there was actually like a huge favorite place for me to go. Really like to get into the trees, into the mountains. Now, after I've done more exploring of Arizona, I really love the Arizona Strip area, which is everything north of the Grand Canyon. So from the North Rim all the way to Utah is referred to as the Arizona Strip. And that has like Paria Canyon, Vermilion Cliffs, Arizona Trail Terminus is up there too. So that might be a little biased. A lot of people would know that area if they've ever looked at doing the wave hike that's in that area.
Yeah, I've never known it referred to as the Strip, but that makes sense, that strip right there in northern Arizona. And very unique place. I know everyone knows the wave, but one that's kind of been more ingrained into my mind is I think it's called White Bluffs, which is just like a few miles away from the wave, where you don't have to do a lottery or permits, but you definitely need like a good 4x4 vehicle to reach them.
Yeah, I think that's part of the the Vermilion Cliffs National Monument, but there's a ton of cool hikes out there. Buckskin Gulch is over there, which is the world's deadliest slot canyon, I believe. And there's only one exit point. I think it's about 20 miles long. Yeah. So there's a lot of exploring there to do. And Native American history too, petroglyphs, everything's all really accessible if you have a good off-road vehicle.
Which kind of brings me to the next question about your vehicle. You have a special, unique home base by the name of Chaos. Can you share a little bit with the listeners about Chaos and how long you've been a part of the van life community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I purchased Chaos in fall of 2021. She is a 2005 Ford E250. When I purchased it, she already had a basic build. So I have a shower, I have a bed, I have a sink, fridge, freezer, stove, solar power. So essentially, I've been doing van life since fall of 2021. But I started living in my vehicles in February of 2021. I had a Toyota Tacoma crew cab with a shell in the back, and I had tried to live in Seattle, and that just didn't work out. So I wasn't working at the time, and on my way, I just decided to take my time and started just living in my truck. And unfortunately, in July of that year, I was at a state park in Oregon and a tree fell on my truck and it totaled my truck right in front of me.
Oh my goodness. What part of Oregon was that?
Near Ashland.
Near Ashland? Okay.
Yeah, I was actually there to pick up trash and a storm kind of rolled in and I was walking back to my truck because it had gone from like a perfect day, tank top, shorts, and started pouring rain. So I'm walking my truck. I was only about 10 yards from it and I heard a crack and the tree really close to me fell forward onto my truck. Luckily, I had comprehensive and really good insurance and they did total it and paid me out for that. So I kind of decided, well, I was already living in a car with no fancy things. So having a basic build van is totally right up my alley. And yeah, so Chaos and I have been just bouncing around since fall of 2021.
I feel like van life has exploded over the last 5-7 years in popularity. For people that are interested, including myself, what's your favorite part of the experience of being part of the community? And then what's the one thing that folks that are interested in getting involved in van life should really consider before they jump in?
My favorite part is the flexibility and freedom aspect. If I'm driving somewhere and I find a cool little town that has accessibility and somewhere for me to camp and everything else, I can hang out there for a week. I don't have to be somewhere else. I don't have to be back home. There aren't all these things waiting for me, chores and yards and all those traditional things that everyone has to deal with. So I really, really like the flexibility. We all get so ingrained on trips that the destination is where we're headed. So you pile in the car and you drive straight there and you do what you're doing, and that's probably great. And you drive straight home. Since living in my van and being nomadic, I've taken the same stretches of highway that I've taken for years going places. But I've finally had the time and flexibility to stop and check out the mountains that are off the highway and check out these little trails and check out all these little nooks and crannies that kind of get, passed by every time. And I've found some amazing, unique things that way. So that's my favorite kind of thing. And also, like I said, if I find something cool, I can stick around forever long I like. I don't have to leave the next day. I don't have to go back somewhere. The other thing is, if I find something that's really boring or really unsafe feeling or just something that's not appealing, I can leave the next day. And I think that's like the nice thing, rent an apartment for 6 months. If you hate your neighbor, you can't just leave without paying a hefty penalty first.
Yeah.
So I think that's my favorite part. But the biggest thing I'd say for people that are considering it, something to think about mostly is, especially if someone's looking to do it solo, is how comfortable you are as far as safety goes. So if you're the person that has to have a Ring camera and has to have like all these things on your house to feel safe in a neighborhood, how is that going to transition to being parked in the middle of nowhere around 10 other vehicles full of people you don't know? I think I've learned that a lot of people I've met through the communities, there's a lot of that going on where these women especially will put and invest all their stuff and time and thinking that they're going to be happy with it, and they go and they start to do it and they kind of panic a bit because they're just not familiar with not having all those safety nets, not having all those things to kind of make them feel safe. So I think that's something for women or men even, just how comfortable do you feel in environments alone? If you have a partner or someone traveling with you, you'll at least have someone to, go through the hard times and, stress with.
And I don't know if it's a common terminology, Bink, but the one thing that I kind of hear from people that have been doing van life for some time is everyone has experienced the knock, somebody knocking on your window, on your door, which can be unnerving in any situation. But have you experienced the knock?
Yeah, the knock is my least favorite and experience. And anytime I hear or read or watch a reel that someone mentions the knock, I have this visceral feeling about the experience for them because I'm like, oh my God, that sucks. I've had it not too bad. I've had it a couple times. There's a Pilot gas station, and a lot of Pilot gas stations let people sleep in their lots overnight. The annoying thing is it's not a company wide thing. And sometimes you will go to one. And so what happened is I went to one, there were a bunch of other people doing the same thing. So I kind of set everything up, and a couple hours into it, I got the knock. Like, oh man. And I moved my shade and I rolled down my window, and he's like, you can't stay here overnight, but in these spots, you just need to move over to these spots. Okay, cool. So I got up, I moved my car or my van at the time, and went to the other spots. About 3 weeks later, I go to that same gas station, park in the spots that I was told 3 weeks ago to park in. Totally at peace. I'm like, cool, I'm good. I get the knock at 5 a.m. and I'm, peek my head out. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you can't stay here overnight. You need to leave right now. I don't know what you're he wasn't nice about it. I was like, okay, not a problem. And left. But it just I think it was more annoying and more caught me off guard because I was doing what I was told was right for that location. And so I was like, wait a second, this makes no sense. So yeah, the knock is definitely not my favorite thing. I'm very conscientious of it. A lot of van life people kind of, I don't want to say make their own rules, but kind of feel a bit entitled to be able to do certain things. I always research before I go to a new city if I'm intending on possibly staying within the city limit. If I'm going to try and stealth park in a neighborhood, I look up the laws of that city first, because I do almost anything possible to avoid the knock. And so I'll look up the laws, can you overnight in your vehicle in this city? If it's a no, I don't risk it. I just don't want to deal with it.
That's a great tip. I feel like one thing that I've been hearing over the last couple of years is Walmart parking lots used to be really friendly for overnight stays, and now it's really becoming some of them are still, and then others are not, and people are getting the knocks now at Walmart parking lots.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes to the whole thing that I was saying, not entitled per se, but they've heard, people have heard, oh, just go to a Walmart. They're 24 hours. No one will bother you. Planet Fitness has 24-hour locations. So a lot of van lifers will park in them. And like I said, I'm part of these communities and groups and forums, and people will say, oh my gosh, how rude. They woke me up at 3 a.m, tell me I needed to leave. They'll even admit, well, there's signs everywhere, but I've heard you can do this. Each location is different. Each place is different. Depends on who owns the parking lot. And it is tough. I think I probably over research things and overdo things where a lot of people kind of just go off what they've heard. And unfortunately, they get stuck in the middle of oh, well, I thought I could, and they can't. Yeah, it's tough. Cracker Barrel is similar. A lot of people, depending on the location of the Cracker Barrel, they do allow for overnight, but then there's other Cracker Barrels that can't. And same situation happens there too.
So it definitely pays to do your research to kind of avoid the knock nowadays, regardless of what you've heard in the past. One thing, Bink, that I really enjoyed in researching this episode is from your Instagram and your blog. You've tackled some amazing thru hikes over the last couple of years. You've done the AZT twice. You did a majority of the Colorado Trail and nearly half of is it the Hayduke Trail? Is that how you pronounce it?
It's the Hayduke.
Hayduke. Yeah, the Hayduke Trail kind of caught my attention because I've personally never heard of it before, but seeing the map and seeing how amazing it sounds, because it takes you through some of the most magical lands in northern Arizona and southern Utah. Can you share a little bit about your experiences on the AZT Trail and then on the HDT Trail as well?
Yeah, absolutely. My thru hike of the AZT in 2017 was my first endeavor into thru hiking. I had done some long distance, trips of a couple days here and there, but the AZT is a 800-mile trail going from Mexico to Utah. The person who started it and created it is from Flagstaff. And so there's a lot of signage and different things that you come across just within the city that have to do with the AZT. So it was kind of in my face while living there. But 2017, I did it with a hiking partner, and we shared a lot of our resources. So we shared a shelter, we shared our cooking setup, we shared our water filtration. The good thing is you have someone to talk to at the end of the day. The bad thing is you're having a bad day and you want to slow down or you don't want to knock the miles out and they're fine. You can't split up. It was a little bit of a up and down. And then unfortunately at the end of 2017, my dad passed away and I had already taken and saved up money to be off of work for a year. So when I stopped working to do the AZT, I had money in savings. My father passed away in December and I just wanted to run away from the real world, as I like to call it. And I just wanted to go to a place that I already knew would bring me some peace, would bring me joy, would bring me like clarity, and also just give me that space to process and grieve. My dad was my biggest supporter. I'm independent because of the values my dad instilled in me. So I just kind of wanted to honor his life and stuff by not being at home sad, because I know he wouldn't want that for me. He'd want me to do something. So I went and I solo hiked it in 2018. Very unique experience. Just, obviously did everything on my own and was able to hike all day if I felt like it, or stop short, or stop at a place to go swimming, stop for a milkshake and fries whenever I wanted to without having someone else put up with it. So that was a great experience in 2018. The Haydock Trail, completely different than what most people think of a trail. I feel like most people think of a trail, they think of the 18-inch wide, dirt, perfectly groomed, well-maintained trail. The Haydock is more of a route. And so you need to have map reading skills. You need to understand directions as far as like cardinal directions. You need to have climbing skills and scrambling skills and be comfortable doing things like that. The first couple hundred miles, you are finding routes to drop into washes, to drop into canyons, finding routes out of canyons, walking along these super exposed slick rock areas that if you really took one tumble, you're going to fall 100 something feet. And you're also in the middle of nowhere with no cell service.
Oh, geez.
Which also just adds more fun to the whole mix. But it is just completely different. I mean, we had to carry ropes so that we could haul our packs up or drop them down because there was no way to actually wear them while doing some of the things like chimney I believe it's called, it's shoot. It's a climbing move that I can't remember at the time, but you have to like brace yourself between two walls and like shimmy up.
Oh, yeah.
To the next point. It was a really, really unique experience and really kind of showed me that I had more skills in my bank than I realized, which are great. I love scrambling. I love route finding. It was a blast. I had to get off because unfortunately it was 2020 and it goes through a bunch of national parks. And by the time we were hitting, I believe it was Bryce Canyon, the federal government had shut down all of the national parks. And essentially we still had a bunch of national parks to go through. And it's like, this isn't going to work. Our Grand Canyon permit that we had we were already told it wasn't going to be honored. And to top it off, we got denied grocery service. So there was definitely like no way to stay. And at some point, I'd love to go back and knock out the rest of the mileage on that. It is just absolutely gorgeous in southern Utah.
For listeners that don't know, the starting or end points, depending on where you are, it's either Zion, right, or Canyonlands. Is that where the other end point is?
So Arches to Zion or Zion to Arches. And Arches and Canyonlands are pretty close to each other. But yeah, the route I did started in Arches and I made it all the way down to Escalante, Utah.
Some of the pictures from that trip, oh my goodness. It's you're going through so many different landscapes in such a short period of time. Those 350 plus miles, it seemed like almost every 100 miles you were in a different geographical landscape.
Yeah, that was amazing too. And there was a lot of cattle. There was also cows around, but it was fun. There was a day it actually like snowed on us and we were supposed to be going, I forget how high in elevation, but we were supposed to essentially go up and over a mountain range. And we were like, I don't know, we'll see how deep the snow is. And by the time we got to the point where we were supposed to keep climbing and find the trail, you couldn't even find the trail. It was under at least 2 feet of snow.
Oh, geez.
So we had, as we're out there in the middle of nowhere, and we've already hiked X amount of miles, so there's no way to we'll just catch the highway. We had to look at our maps and we had to evaluate the situation and see how we could connect to the trail otherwise. So we had to make our own route. like out there in the middle of nowhere and looking at the maps and comparing things and looking at elevation maps and topo maps and everything to say, okay, here's where we can go. So we actually ended up post tolling, which is where you make fresh tracks on deep snow for like 10 miles. It was a long day.
Wow. And I'm guessing you probably didn't pack snowshoes or micro spikes?
No, we didn't. We didn't have either one. Luckily, it was soft enough where it wasn't too bad and it wasn't slippery yet. It did make for a fun time.
Now, something else that caught my attention when researching Bink is you've made it up to the Pacific Northwest multiple times, and not just the west side of the Cascades. You even ventured out to Eastern Washington, which is almost like a different state, because you get the rain, the green from the west side, but then once you go further east, it reminds me more of Arizona, where you get the high desert landscape, kind of like Flagstaff. What are some of the trails in Washington that have been memorable for you?
So I stayed out in the Seattle area for a couple months, and my friends lived there for a while, so she gave me a bunch of great references. And I went out to Oyster Dome, and it's about 1,000-foot climb to this vista. And she said, hopefully you go on a clear day, because, and I'm from Arizona, so I'm so used to just like, what do you mean clear day? Like, I'm not used to fog or worrying about that. And I got up there and it was a bit cloudy, but the view of Oyster Dome was still clear, and it just kind of blew my mind. It was like the sun wasn't even setting yet, but the colors were bouncing off the clouds in just this way that like brought peace. And everyone up there, because there was probably about 15 people up there when I got to the lookout point, everyone was calm. You get some summits or some lookout points and everyone's just loud and talkative, and up there it was just this nice beautiful view, and you had the water and everything else. So Oyster Dome was one of my favorites. Wallace Falls in the Central Cascade, I did that with her recommendation. It's not a very hard or long hike, but it was just gorgeous. It was probably like one of the first hikes I had ever done where there was just constant water. Once again, Arizona desert rat, so I'm not used to that. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this does exist. So just kind of was amazed by that. There's beautiful waterfalls, and all the moss and the trees. And it rained that whole hike, but it was just gorgeous. And of course, the whole rainforest. You can't skip that if you're in that area.
And talking about waterfalls, you actually got a chance to visit. It's not really hidden. It's well known, but it's one of the gems of Eastern Washington, which is Palouse Falls, because it's out in the middle of nowhere. And you got a chance to visit it almost towards the end of the day, right? And you were still able to kind of experience it?
Yeah, I'd say that's the only thing I wish is I had more time. I got there with maybe 10 minutes before it was going to close, and I parked and took a few pictures and read some signs, and it was gorgeous. And I'm hoping to be up in that area mid-year this year, and hoping to get back to Palouse Falls specifically to like actually spend time and like look around and take it in a little bit better next time.
And then, even though this isn't a hike, you visited something that's really unique to Washington that I don't think many tourists or travelers know, but it's the Stonehenge replica in Maryhill, which is right on the Columbia in like South Central Washington. How did that kind of come about?
The same friend from the Seattle area, she was the one that actually told me about Palouse Falls and Ancient Lakes, which is also in Eastern Washington, which I did some hiking there. She told me about the Stonehenge place. And I mean, I had like it mentally on my mind, but it wasn't going to be a stop. It was like, oh yeah, and there's this. And I was going to be driving by it. But I don't know, as I was driving, I was kind of like, that'd be kind of neat to see. Like this attempted replica of actual Stonehenge here in the middle of Washington, in the middle of nowhere along the river. I'm going to stop. And I have no regrets about stopping. I stopped, happened to be right around golden hour. It was perfect. Got to see some really neat, just the way the lighting changed throughout it and as the sun was setting. And there's also cows on the other side of the street. I am apparently obsessed with cows. There were cows there too, so it was really neat to see.
Yeah, and you actually found some great information during your research of it that I didn't even know. I knew it was a World War I memorial, but I guess the guy that created the structure or developed the structure had a reason for it that in the end, because of what the true Stonehenge was about, kind of didn't follow his initial, I guess, idea. Because he was trying to connect, I think, because he thought Stonehenge was like a sacrificial place. And because the Great War had so many deaths, he kind of was like linking it that way. But nowadays we kind of know that Stonehenge wasn't really a sacrificial area.
Yeah. So it was built as a war memorial to like memorialize the deaths that we lost from that area, because they had a couple areas that had a lot of soldiers that had gone and didn't return. And exactly, he was doing it compared to the sacrificial aspects of what they thought Stonehenge may have been, but definitely nowadays they're like, oh no, we think it's something completely different based on actually, I believe it has to do with like the sundial and time and changing of seasons.
And I've only heard of it. I've never got a chance to experience it, but I think during one of the equinoxes, people do go out there and do a ceremony, whether it's spring or summer. But I think it lines up kind of like Stonehenge would have, and they do it. I don't know if it's a Druid ceremony, but they do a ceremony to kind of welcome the equinox.
That would be really cool to see, at least. I'm sure the equinox is a very good, refreshing and restart of season and takes a nice turn in the year.
Going back to Arizona, one thing that also caught my eye, which ended up for me, looking back now at all my hikes in Arizona, one of my favorite hikes that I did when I was living there, and that's Red Mountain Trail, kind of outside of Flagstaff if you're going to the Grand Canyon. Can you share with the listeners a little bit more about this special place and some of your experiences visiting it throughout the years?
Red Mountain Trail is one of my absolute favorite trails to recommend to anyone that asks. So if someone's coming through Flagstaff or going through Flagstaff and they ask me, Red Mountain is where I send everyone. It's a fairly short hike and it's easy, but you walk out to these volcanic cinder cones and you kind of feel like you're on another planet. Like maybe they use it for the background of some movie on Mars or something, because it is red. It stands out from the landscaping because in that area, it's a high desert kind of dry brush, dry grass, junipers, and low bushes. And then you have this red kind of mound that if you're not even looking beyond the highway, you don't even notice it. It's just off there by itself. I really like going there. I like taking friends there. I've gone there a few times in my life where things have changed. So I tore my calf in fall of 2020. And once my doctor released me to walk longer distances than a mile, I was like, I'm going to go to Red Mountain because I knew it was going to be, it's fairly flat. There is a bit of sand, but it's a short stretch of sand. And so that's where I went for that. I was like, okay, cool. I can walk again. I'm going to go on a trail. And also in 2017, I went there with my mom, and it was the first hike I had done after my dad had passed away. And it was on Christmas Day. So my mom and I went on that hike on Christmas Day, kind of just to be outside and not so, like I said, my dad wouldn't want to sit around and be sad. So Red Mountain's great. It's super unique. Everyone should go. But even if you're just passing through to go, like you said, the Grand Canyon, it's on the way. Short stop, easy road access, and just really, really unique. You can kind of walk around. The trail ends, but you're at these mountains and these little waterways, and it's smooth sandstone kind of, and you can walk around and climb around and see really neat things. I've seen people climb fairly high up to areas that I wouldn't do, but yeah, there are limitations. You aren't supposed to climb up to the very top in the back because it's protected by the Forest Service for Native American reasons.
You really described it well. It kind of looks like you're in a different planet, or like Star Wars comes to mind. Like they could use it as a backdrop, and the colors are really unique. But the one thing that kind of caught my eye when I first did it was once you get to the mountain, there's like these black hills of, I think, what used to be like volcanic rock that's kind of become more like sand. And
so there's cinders.
Cinders. Oh, okay. And then it kind of goes into the more reddish colors, and it's quite the contrast to see that black cinder sand compared to everything else in the area.
Yeah, it is neat. You're right, because you take that little wash stretch and then you start to have the cinders kind of appear on either side, and you do that really neat, really short ladder as you kind of enter into the grand space of these red mounds and the little holes and everything else. Yeah, that is true. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's still to this day is up there, like maybe top 3 hikes I've ever did in Arizona.
That's so cool. Yeah, definitely my favorite, one of my favorites.
We did a deep dive into your Instagram, and I feel like van lifers especially know how to reach some of the more unique hot springs throughout the West Coast. Is there one that kind of sticks out above the rest that you've been able to visit? And then for anybody who hasn't visited hot springs, especially natural hot springs, any tips or advice to those individuals?
Yeah. So in December of 2021, I found Gold Strike Hot Springs, which is on the Nevada side of the Colorado River. And I did the hike. I should have planned for more time the first time I did it to really enjoy it. And the reason I needed more time, even though it's only a 2 mile out, so 4 mile out and back, is there's 6 problems that you have to have like 20-foot rope to drop into. So you do a little bit of like rock climbing a bit, and you have to like figure out some problem solving things going in. And it's just really unique because of that. I think you get down and you do those 6 ropes, and there's a lot of like walking and like river rocks and stuff, but you start to hit these spots where it's seeping from the walls, and you have these like really colorful algae, and you have these algae in the water, which are beautiful. But that also is the best thing to keep in mind for first timers going to hot springs is there's algae in the water. So you don't want to be hanging out under the water or like completely like putting your head under. You can, just don't take in the water. Those bacteria and algae can really, really mess with people's systems. That is one of my tips. My other tip is to take a microfiber travel towel, because they fold really small. You can dry off. You can also use it if you want to be a little more private when you're changing in and out of your clothes to get in and out of the hot springs. And then take a dry bag, because if you drop your regular backpack into the water, all your stuff's screwed. And there is a lot of water you kind of walk through. Yeah, just make sure you have a towel and something to protect all your gear, and maybe even a spare bag for your wet clothes so it's not sitting in your bag with all your other clothes.
Oh, those are great tips. Yeah, because if you take a traditional towel, that's going to take up quite a bit of space.
And I see that pretty often.
Good tip on the microfiber towel. And yeah, you're going to have to pack out the wet clothes unless you're going to hike out with them, which doesn't sound like a pleasant experience. So to have something that you can carry it in is clutch.
Yeah. Absolutely. And to have something separate, like I said, like a separate bag, because some people put their wet clothes back in their bag without thinking that they have their warmer layers in there. And when you first kind of start hiking, you're like, oh, I'm good. Like, I'm all dry, but you might start to get a little cold and you want to grab your layers, and now they're wet. That's why it's another good idea.
No, solid tip. Now, I feel like a lot of hikers, especially day hikers and some backpackers, they have a summit ritual or end of the hike ritual. Maybe it's a favorite snack or meal, possibly some trail brews, or even a moment of zen. Do you have a regular custom that you do when you reach your destination, or maybe when you make it back out?
When I get to a summit, it's nothing formal. I don't have like, this is what I do. But what I find myself doing most often is sitting down, taking everything in. I look at everything from the rocks by my feet to the stretches of the horizon. I just take it all in. I kind of process everything that's gotten me to that point, whether it's emotionally, physically, literally the trail, and just be grateful for those times and those things. Take in like the feeling of the air on my face, the sounds of nature or the sounds of people, whatever it may be, and just kind of hippie-ish, I guess, of me. But I thank the trees, the mountain, the trail, all the things for letting me enjoy them. And then I just, take a few more minutes to process, and not gonna lie, might shed a tear or two. And then I drink way too much water, eat all my sugary and salty snacks, and then head back out.
I like that. The more people I talk to, it's really great to hear that some of their regular things that they do is once they reach the summit is they kind of just take it all in and appreciate its grandness. Because you do tend to see, especially at really like popular hikes, where people might just reach the summit, get their phone out, take a picture or two, and then start hiking back down. That just kind of blows my mind, is like, you made it up there. Why not really take it in?
Hopefully they're happy, and hopefully at the end of the day, like, they found happiness in that hike. But I definitely need that time to take it all in. I don't need that time, but I like to take that time. I like to make that conscious choice to absorb all that and just find peace in that.
So I feel like with backpackers especially, their pack list can change over the years. Has there been a big change from when you did the AZT trail in 2017 to what you're currently packing now as your through hike pack list, I guess?
Absolutely. I started with like some really rugged oboes shoes, my first like 200 miles of the AZT, and they actually failed within those 200 miles. My toe was going through the tread and like hitting the ground. So I actually transitioned to Ultra Lone Peaks way back then, and now I only wear Ultra Lone Peak for long distance hiking. I've lightened my shelter. I bought, this Osprey backpack in 2017 that was like women specific and great for women and all these things. I was like, this is going to be perfect. And I hated it. And I had pack envy because my friend had a Hyperlight mountain gear, which was like super light. And, he could just throw everything in the top pocket and roll it down, where I had all these little pockets and zippers and just way too much. So the next year I actually bought like the same pack. So I've changed my pack. I've changed my shelter. I really try and go lighter. I do have some luxury items that I just can't leave behind, like a hairbrush. I'm definitely one of those hikers now that carries just the head of a toothbrush just to save weight. But then I'll still take a phone and two backup batteries and just a lot of extra.
Do you have one specific item that you would consider your most valuable piece of gear on hikes?
It might be camp shoes. Right now I carry Zero Brand sandals. They're a little heavy. They're about 12 ounces, but it's nice to have something to wear around at camp or even when I'm in town. So if I'm taking a day off or I'm taking a half day in town, I kind of want to like not wear shoes. And Zeros are minimalist shoes. And so they let your foot work more naturally as well. And it's just nice to have, just to be able to like walk around and not always be in your, dirty, raggedy shoes that are covered in mud and smell horrible.
Now, one of my previous guests, one of my favorite things that she packed, and it's considered I guess, a luxury item in backpacking, is she brought this like little candle that was one of those, light switch candles where you just switch on at the bottom and it kind of gives the effect of a candle. Is there a particular item that you take that's kind of like your luxury little comfort item that you bring that, might not necessarily be part of the 10 essentials, but it adds to the ambiance of your hikes?
I always take a pencil, like a mechanical pencil, and a notebook. So I take the Write in the Rain notebook so the paper can get wet and it doesn't tear, it doesn't fall apart, it doesn't deteriorate, and the pencil it's pencil, so it's not going to bleed. And I like to take that because sometimes when I'm sitting at those summits and I'm taking all this in and I have maybe not like some crazy realization or anything, but just I get inspired to write something, I can just pull that out and write it. Granted, yes, we all have our cell phones and I could sit there and type it on my phone, but I like the sensation of writing things still. I handwrite a lot of things and it just kind of like slows me down to process it a little better and a little more in depth by writing it. And so those are like some weird luxury items that I take with me, but definitely bring me happiness.
Now, switching up gears, and we kind of talked about the knock, but has there been any other unique experiences that you've had on the trails, whether it's nearly getting lost or maybe an unexpected wildlife encounter? Maybe Mother Nature kind of threw you a curveball that you weren't suspecting or expecting, or just any weird interactions with other hikers on the trail?
Nothing too crazy, in my opinion, but in 2012, I was hiking out of the Grand Canyon. It was a day hike. It wasn't anything crazy. And I could not catch my breath. And I've been an athlete my whole life. Like I said, I was a runner. I was running then. And I just literally could not catch my breath. Not to the point of actual, like, not breathing, but it was frightening. It was scary. And even the ranger stopped and he thought maybe I just needed water. But I mean, I could stop for a full minute and kind of like start to regain my breath. But as I kept going, it just stayed at this weird point. So I eventually figured that out with doctors. I have exercise-induced anaphylaxis.
Oh.
And so I actually carry an EpiPen with me in case I go into anaphylaxis because of the trigger from that. It also has a lot to do with I'm allergic to a lot of other things. So all combined can cause that issue. I'm allergic to cold. If it's too cold, my body breaks out in hives. I'm a fun person to hike with. But so that's like a crazy medical one. But as far as anything else, on the Colorado Trail this past season, I had a really weird hitch because you have to hitch in and out of town unless you want to walk for miles and miles extra. So I was having a lot of trouble hitching out. It happened to be Labor Day, and a lot of people passing through the area were tourists. So they've got their RVs or their motorcycles, so they can't pick me up anyway. But I had tried for 3 hours, no luck. And so I got off the highway and was taking a side road because it was safer. And I'm just walking at this point. I'm not even hitching. I'm just head down, kind of walking. And this truck stops in the middle of the road. And He's like, hey, where are you trying to go? And I told him and like showed him the maps. And so he's like, yeah, I'm from here. Like, jump in the back. That way you can feel safe. Go ahead and run in the back. I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, it's nice of him to offer. So I start to climb in the back and he starts to go before I'm even fully in the bed of the truck. And so already I'm kind of like, okay. He's like, oh, sorry. So I sit down. As I'm sitting down, I realize there's like empty beer cans all over the back of the truck. I don't know if they're from right now. I don't know if they're from last week. Who knows? There's a bag of raw chicken sitting next to me. I have no clue what's going on at this point. He's also driving at least twice the speed limit. Luckily, at that time, we were still like on a regular road, but I knew we were going to hit a dirt road at some point. So we turn off the main road and we hit the dirt road, and he's still going fairly fast, especially for a dirt road. It's rugged, it's bumping. I'm like holding on for dear life, but I also, just in case, I like took a video of like the pictures and like stickers he had on the back window. I'm like trying to get any kind of like video evidence just in case anything were to happen. Whoever finds my phone is like, oh, she was with that guy. Luckily, about 2 miles into the dirt road, he pulled over and he's like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, I don't think my truck's going to make it any further. I was like, that's fine. And I climb out and he climbs out. And I realized, like, I don't think this guy has showered in a while. His pants are probably a month worth of dirt on them. He is really kooky. And like, I had finally got enough time speaking with him to realize, okay, he's a little like not off, and like he's definitely gonna like, I don't know, stalk me, but just I wish I had taken like a little bit of extra time talking to him before taking the ride, I guess. And everything was fine, obviously, nothing too crazy, but it was probably the one time that I've hitched that I was kind of like, oh, I'm not telling my mom about this. She'll hear it now, but
the one thing that, keeps kind of playing in my mind is why he had raw chicken in the back of a truck. I wish there was a way I could explain it. Like maybe he was, but yeah, that's just random.
Initially, when I like saw it out of the corner of my eye, I was like, well, maybe I can't tell that like the cellophane's still on it. And then I glanced over again and no, it was a grocery bag with just raw chicken pieces. Like as if he bought the
weird.
package, opened it, dumped it in the bag, and then put the bag in the back of the truck.
Interesting.
But yeah, definitely one of those, like, that's the thing I have a question on. Excuse me, sir. Before you drop me off, just wondering.
What's with the chicken?
Yeah, tell me about this chicken.
Well, I'm glad everything turned out right. Yeah, that's a strange tale, strange experience, but glad everything worked out in the end. Were you able to hitch out after that, after he dropped you out or dropped you off?
After he dropped me off, I think only one car actually passed me going the direction I was going. So I didn't get a hitch. I just walked the extra 2 miles, but it did add to, I didn't get much mileage in that day by the time I actually hit the trail because it was so late in the day and everything else. But
yeah, that's a story to tell. Throughout all your hiking experiences and adventures, for anybody that's interested in starting to hike or backpack this year, is there any advice that you could give beginners to help them have a safe and rewarding experience on the trails?
There's definitely a few things that I'd recommend for new hikers setting out. If they really don't have, this stamina or ready to even walk in their neighborhood for 3 or 4 miles, start small. Plenty of trails surrounding big cities and surrounding cities have little loop connecting trails where you can do a mile or you can do a mile and a half. Don't be scared or don't feel ashamed that you have to start small or you're only hiking a mile, because we all start somewhere. And if we want to be an accepting hiking community and bring new people in and show new people these ways, we have to understand like everyone starts somewhere. So don't judge yourself if you're like, well, it's only a mile or it's only 2 miles. Get out there and still do it, because you'll start to build that and you'll start to figure out if you enjoy it or not. And then you can just build from there, get bigger from there. The other thing I always recommend for new hikers, because it might not be something they realize, is you want to have maps that aren't reliable on cell service and cell signal, because once you get on trails, you can lose that cell service instantly. And, there are apps where you can pull up the trail, and if you're hiking in town all the time, you kind of think, you may not realize like, oh, if I go out of town or go into a wilderness area, that you're not going to have that luxury. And a lot of those apps do offer that you can download the map and download that. So I just always recommend having an accessible map. It doesn't have to be physical. I'm not that old school, but having a a map that you can access without cell service is a great safety thing, as well as a way to contact people without cell service.
For that, I have a InReach Mini. What emergency device do you use?
I use an InReach Mini as well. I've had it for a couple years now. I got it right before I went on the Hayduke, which was very beneficial because there were stretches there where we did not have cell service for 7 days. And it was during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic. So as you know, you can get text messages to family and family can get you a text message as well. And so that was beneficial for those times. And it's really great to give my mom a peace of mind because I have mine do my pin drops every 10 minutes. So if I'm hiking, I'll turn it on and have that tracking so my mom can see, okay, she's still bouncing around on the trail. She's good. It gives her some peace of mind. And also she knows if she needs me, she can reach out.
It's definitely great that they have now technology that you can do that. Not just to give yourself peace of mind, but to your friends and family. It's big because there's definitely been hikes for me where I'm like, okay, this is only going to take like 4 hours. And then whether it's sightseeing or just interaction with other hikers, it ends up being more like 5 or 6. And if you tell your friends and family, I'm going to be out by this time and you haven't reached out, it's good to have that text message ability to be like, hey, I'm running a little behind. Don't worry, I'll be out at this time.
Yeah, I have one of my preset texts that I can post is taking a break. Because you realize, like you said, like you might stop to chat with someone or get distracted or whatever, and if I realize I've been stopped for like an hour or longer, I'll just send that one like, hey, just to let you know, I'm just taking a break.
Oh, I'm gonna have to program that into mine instead of having to send it out each time. That's a good tip. For this new year, since we're just getting started, do you have any hiking or travel goals for 2023 and beyond?
I'd really like to get back to the Colorado Trail and finish that last stretch that I have. I did up to mile 302.9, and I'd like to just go back out and either go from the terminus back towards where I got off or where I got off to the terminus. It just depends on timing and weather. And another thing I'd like to do this long distance hiking season is go up to the Tahoe Rim Trail and do that one. Last summer, I went with my friend and we were going to do the whole thing. We had it all planned. We flew out there. He had a back injury that happened maybe a couple weeks before. And he was kind of hoping it was just a strain and it'll go away. But unfortunately, we got only about 12 miles, I think, the first day or 10 miles. And we had to stop because it was hurting him so bad. And the next day we got up and did another 10 miles and had to get off around mile 20 and call it. So I'd like to go back and start that one all over and do the whole thing. It's really gorgeous out there. And there's a lot of bears.
Oh, which does bring a question. I wasn't able to piece it all together, but from your blog post, there is a love for bears that you have. Have you gotten to experience some bears in real life on your hiking adventures?
Surprisingly, I didn't see a bear in the wild until I want to say it was 2019. And it happened to be about 10 minutes from my house in Flagstaff. I was out for a run and about 30 yards from the trail was a mama bear and her 2 cubs, which I already know is like worst case scenario. And I saw them, the cubs were climbing the tree, the mama bear was on the floor, and I was like, I'm going to go. So that was the first time seeing bears in the wild. And then I have seen, so in Tahoe, this past summer, I saw 5 bears all in one day. The greatest day of my life, practically. I have never seen that many bears besides at a zoo in one place. I've seen bears. I was camping down by Aravaipa, which is in Arizona. It's a wilderness area. Gorgeous. Check it out. Look it up. And I saw bear prints near my campsite. And it was a car camping thing and was at my site. And the bear starts walking up the dirt road towards like the general area. And it's like, oh, there's a bear. So kind of watched it for a bit and it wasn't interested in the campsite. Luckily there was a wash and it started taking the wash, but it was just amazing. It's amazing to watch a mighty animal just kind of pounce around and like do his own thing and like eat grass. So yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of bears now. I saw another one. I was taking a nap, like a trail nap, I like to call them. You're hiking for a bit. You're like, I'm kind of tired. Just stop, lay down for a bit. And I heard something like step on branches. And it was definitely something heavy because the amount of branches that broke, I shot up and like looked around. I was like, that's got to be a bear. And yeah, about 15 yards away through a wash, a bear just like walked by, and I made a noise because it was a black bear. So it's like I made some noise and he just shot right up the other side of the canyon. So I was like, okay, it's been great. I love bears. Some of my friends are like, Bink, like, do not approach a bear, right? I'm like, yeah, I know, but I still want to see him. And I think there might be some friends and family that actually think I might approach a bear to try and either catch it, have it live with me in chaos. But I'm reasonable. There's enough room for two of us in there.
I'm the same way, Big. So there's been 2 opportunities for me to see bears, and I didn't get a chance. The first one was visiting Banff, and we did a hike that nobody else was doing. And retelling the story recently, I was like, you know why people weren't doing this hike is because you needed to have like bear spray and bear stuff. But we walked down to a lake. Luckily, we didn't encounter any bears, but throughout the trip, we were trying to take highways that bears are known to be next to, and we didn't get to see them. And then in Tahoe, I was there for the first time this last summer, and, I was expecting to see a bear on the side of the road or something. And we didn't get to see it until the day we're leaving. We stayed at this hotel. One of the guests that was outside smoking was like, did you guys see the bear last night? It was like the biggest bear I've ever seen. And it was just chilling right next to the hotel in the woods. And I think we just missed it by like 5 or 10 minutes when we arrived that night and when it came out. So I've yet to see a bear. It's one of those things that I want to see, but at a safe distance.
Right. That's what I tell people. I'm like, I really want to see a bear, but like far enough away. I got to a hotel in Colorado and I was checking in, and the clerk says, oh, you missed Gary. Who's Gary? Like, I've never been here before. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't say that, but I was thinking that. And I looked at her and she goes, the bear. Gary hangs out in our parking lot and you just missed him. He left probably about 10 minutes ago. I was like, wait, there's a bear that hangs out here? Like, I got really excited. It was kind of sad that I'm leaving the next day, but I was like, dang it. And because that was like the biggest thing, everyone on the Colorado Trail always sees bears. And I ran into so many hikers that had bear experiences and everything else. And I was like, bears are my favorite. Why aren't they hanging out with me? And I was really disappointed because when I did decide to get off the trail, the hitch I was riding with, I was telling him, I was like, yeah, the whole last stretch, I was kind of like, okay, if I see a bear, I'm making the right choice. Like, I must see a bear, kind of check that off my list. And he's like, did you see one? I was like, no, we are taking one of the last curves of a highway to his house. That sounds weird, but he was going to let me stay there so I could catch a flight the next morning. But we were taking the last curve, and in the middle of the road are 2 cubs and a mama bear. And the road was like a 50-mile-per-hour road, but like we come around this curve and there they are just hanging out on the road. And they ran a bit on the road and then took off into the side, and it's like, all right, I saw my bear.
Oh, how neat. Yeah, I really liked reading that blog post about that experience. Would they be considered trail angels? People that really kind of go above and beyond to help out fellow hikers?
Yeah. They actually had never helped out a hiker before.
Oh.
He said he's taken that road 100 times, and there's oftentimes hikers out there hitching. And he's like, I've never helped one, but you look nice, so I picked you up. And they went above and beyond for me. And I kind of joke that I keep my trail karma up because I do a lot of trail angel work, especially out here on the AZT. Or if my friends are hiking trails, like I'll do what I can to help them. My friend was hiking the AZT in the fall, and I picked her up a few times, picked her up in like really deep, cold night up by Flagstaff, let her sleep in the van, stuff like that, just to help out. When I tore my other calf in 2021, I was supposed to go back and finish the haydock, actually couldn't. So I was like, well, now what am I going to do? I have all this food I stocked up on. So I went to some of the trail access points in the Tucson area and just would hang out in the parking lot and like wait for hikers to come through, offer them rides, offer them food, offer them beer because they love beer. And yeah, it's been a great experience. Kind of like you said with this whole thing with podcasting and reaching out to hikers in this way, like you meet really cool people and you make these cool connections and you hear cool stories. And doing like trail angel work, working and volunteering along the Arizona Trail, I have met some of the most amazing people. And I love to just follow them on Instagram and follow their journeys as they keep hiking or they break records. And it's an amazing community.
I can't say enough good things about this community, both the hiking, backpacking, and even the van life. They really do help one another and support one another. It's one of the few communities where there's not so much negativity or trolling, I guess. It's really just a great community to be a part of. Well, Bink, that was the end of the open-ended questions. The next little section is this or that questions, all related to hiking. So I'm going to give you two options, and you kind of just shoot for the one that you prefer out of the two. So the first one is ascending or descending.
I might be the only person that ever says this, descending.
I think you might be. I'm going to have to go back and look that up, but I think you might be the first. Waterfalls or summits?
Waterfalls.
Switchbacks or straight up?
Straight up.
Trek poles or freehand?
I love my trekking poles.
And do you fuel up before a hike or do you fill up after?
Fill up after.
And how about bushwhack or go around?
Bushwhack, as long as it's an environment I can safely.
And how about, do you jump in or do you stay dry?
Jump in.
Sunsets or sunrises?
100% sunset.
And spring flowers or fall colors?
Spring flowers.
And do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
Tag a hike. If I don't think it should be tagged, I'm not going to post it online.
Oh, I like that. I like that rule. Awesome, Bink. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. For listeners that want to follow you on social media and online, what's the best places they can find you and follow your journey and your adventures this upcoming year?
The best place and the place I'm most active on is my Instagram, and that's Adventures of Bink is my handle. They can also find me on other social media with the same handle, and my website where my blog lives, where my galleries live, is adventuresofbink.com.
Yeah, I'll be sure to add those to the episode notes so people can follow along. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with me, and I look forward to seeing your adventures this year.
Yeah, thanks, Ivan. It's been a blast. Really glad I got to chat with you and share my stories, and I look forward to hearing more from you and seeing more from you.
Appreciate it, Bink. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you once again to Bink for joining us on this episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. Be sure to follow her on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Adventures of Bink, as well as on her website, adventuresofbink.com, to keep up with her latest travels and hikes. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. We'll be putting out new episodes every week through the fall and winter. Be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on those. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Hikes and Mikes. Catch you on the next one. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsockswithaz.com and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth in disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of Flip Socks today with the promo code HikesMikes10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.